to the Web3 Prof Podcast.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I have the privilege of interviewing Jeff Booth once again, general partner at Ego Death Capital, and of course, best-selling author of The Price of Tomorrow. Jeff, thanks so much for being with me here today.
No problem. Great to see you.
Jeff, it's always a pleasure to be with you. We're going to talk about all kinds of different things, Bitcoin today, but let's first maybe get your sense of, it's been 18 months since we last spoke. What do you think of Bitcoin today versus maybe what you thought of Bitcoin a couple of years ago?
Similar. I'd gone really deep in Bitcoin and writing the book, and then after writing the book, trying to disprove my hypothesis.
Right.
And so from that, kind of everything that I'm seeing play out is kind of what I would expect to play out, both on Bitcoin and the existing system most people are measuring Bitcoin from. So I don't think any surprises.
When the Bitcoin ETFs got approved in the United States, is this something that you think is good for Bitcoin?
It depends. Like most things, the nuance of that question is the so on a level of it attracts more people to Bitcoin and understanding Bitcoin. Yes, more awareness of Bitcoin. Yes,
yeah.
Standing alone in potentially centralizing Bitcoin, and most people measuring Bitcoin pricing going up through a US dollar that's centralizing. It's a bad thing.
Okay, interesting.
So that nuance, and we could explore that later in the podcast or now, but that's going to be really important as we go forward.
Do you think that Bitcoiners should have been fighting against the ETF due to the centralization?
No.
Why not?
Because it's a natural market function so how about we start at a different spot, because I think that's going to be more helpful. What things do we know for sure are true? We know free markets are more productive than centralized ones, right? We know that for sure.
Yeah.
Because there's more shots on net, more people creating value. Most things fail. Yeah. And we use the things that are more successful because they're more value to us. And so that we know free markets are more productive. We also know that the natural state of a free market is deflation. And why? Because we use the things that give us more value. So we're part of the construct of something that is the natural free market is deflation. And we trade with people all over the world to try to create more value. And as humans, we solve problems. Where there's a problem, let's say there's a problem in energy shortage or a problem in food shortage. Because of the demand, the price goes up for a while. It attracts more and more people to solve that problem. And all of human history, solving problems is what we do. Yeah. And we take for granted all of what comes from solving problems. Right? Computers today, everything came from ideas in us that were brought out by the free market. That process is deflationary. So we know that's for sure. We also know prices fall to the marginal cost of production. So tend to trend towards the marginal cost of production through the same competition. Yeah. So the marginal cost of production of a line of code is zero, and why your calculator app on your iPhone is zero is because the competition races to find better and better and cheaper ways to do it. Becomes abundant, everyone uses it, and the entrepreneurs go to somewhere else. Right. They can make more money. So that process is deflationary. That means anything we've ever lived in that's inflationary is actually not a free market. It's a control system. And all of the isms, capitalism, socialism, Marxism, communism, are all control structures on top of that. So we know these things are true. And there's never been before Bitcoin something that was decentralized and secure that could stop us from trying to co-opt money, right? In 5,000 years of history, we've never seen it. And so now you have Bitcoin that is decentralized and secure, and in 15 years, it can't be stopped, right? It keeps on going. So if you knew that, and you knew everything that I knew, and you were part of the security apparatus of the entire world, how would you stop Bitcoin?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't you try to stop it through layer 2? Wouldn't you try to use the exact same thing that's centralized all currencies in over time, centralized gold, right? And allowed you to play in an extractive economy forever to use, because most people from that system that's manipulating money to make prices go up would measure Bitcoin thinking it's going up instead of all prices are falling against it forever.
Right.
So you'd have a natural advantage to say, let's price Bitcoin in US dollars.
Yeah.
And everybody would do it. Right. And then from layer 2, their actions, thinking they're winning on top of that, would allow you to centralize Bitcoin from layer 2. And then from there, because people weren't trading in the underlying asset of Bitcoin, they weren't using it as a money. They were using a US dollar derivative on top of that. You would run price suppression, just like you did to gold.
Right. It's interesting because my kids, we were chatting earlier. They have a lemonade stand and they accept Bitcoin, and then all the profits that they have from their lemonade stand, they buy Bitcoin with. They don't really like that idea because they want to buy candy. But anyways, I forced them into it due to my centralized authority over them. And then they ask me, Daddy, they're 7, 9, and 11 years old. So, Daddy, do I have more Bitcoin now than I did before? And because I tell them it's a good idea to hold Bitcoin, and then trying to explain to them, well, no, you don't have more Bitcoin. You have the same amount of Bitcoin, but what you can do with your Bitcoin is more now than it was before. You could buy more candy now than you could a few months ago, and they seem to understand that. But when we talk about like the price changes, like, oh, in Canadian dollars, you have more Bitcoin, that gets a little bit more confusing for them. And I think when we're looking at even explaining Bitcoin to like the general population or people who don't know anything about it, like trying to communicate this is challenging. It's hard to explain why this is important to a lot of people because they don't understand kind of the inflation or deflationary markets we live in.
Yeah, and keep in mind, inflation shouldn't be measured from zero. In a free market, it should be measured from the implied deflation rate.
Can you explain that?
So if I said the natural state of the market, natural state of a free market is deflation, because every actor within an economy, every entrepreneur, every person working for an entrepreneur is trying to provide value to somebody else.
Yeah.
And they're competing with everybody that came before them.
Yeah.
So if you are a new business, now you're going to use AI to create more value. What that means is less jobs, but more value. And if you create more value than what came before you, then you'll win, and the customer will win.
Yeah.
Right. That's why we use things that provide more value. Like just do a thought experiment and say, what if Google charges $5 a click? Would you use something else? Of course.
Yeah.
And so all of these companies that you're using are trying their best to, I say if they're not monopolies,
right,
but they're trying their best to provide you the most value.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, if they don't automate, you won't use them anymore. So, and we're part of that equation. Like we are because we always choose more value. So the natural output of a free market has to be deflation. And I would guesstimate today in our world today that forget about the misallocation of capital, because to be able to essentially create more monetary units to stop that is just a massive misallocation of capital that is a centralizing function. Because inflation equals wage deflation. It picks the pocket of the poor and middle class at a crazy rate. And those people are essentially fighting harder and harder. And because they can't win in that system, they vote for more socialism to be able to destroy the free market more and make the problem worse for themselves. Right. And it's just a natural, because they don't know what we're talking about. Yeah. But it's a natural state. If I can't keep up and my house and the houses got more expensive and I can't pay to feed my family, then I vote for more government control to stop those bad people.
Yes.
Right. Which actually all accretes through centralization and makes the problem worse for those people. So the natural rate of deflation in the market today, as far as it's a guesstimate. You can't measure a counterfactual, but today it would be, I think, about 5%. In other words, if you didn't work every year, you would get richer by 5%. And the next year, because of all the innovation productivity, it'll be 7%. And next year it might be 12%. And the next, and all prices would fall along that, and you would work less and less and less, and you would get more and more and more as the technology that is supposed to flow to us in the form of lower prices is allowed to do its job.
Right.
You don't measure from that system. And most people, that means you measure from inflation rate thinking it's zero. So that means that the government is stealing, not just government, but all of the actors within this is stealing that 5% productivity plus the inflation rate every year. How is it possible that you live in a democracy if you don't have a vote in that rate of theft?
Right. Yeah. Well, I guess that then speaks to the fact that maybe we don't truly live in a democracy.
You don't. You live in a control system where both sides of that control system are highly paid actors with the money coming from you, and why both sides, no matter who you vote for inside that control system, under that dynamic, require more and more manipulation of money. Right. So it's just what it says is, who gets more of the spoils that come from you? That's what you're voting for.
Yeah. Do you view Bitcoin as one of its greatest value propositions as a hedge against inflation?
No. So I think it's one part of. I think a lot of people would see that if they're early into Bitcoin. But really, what they're saying in that use case is they're saying, I'm going to still price from my fiat piece of paper, and I think Bitcoin's going up, like gold. Right. And what they're actually doing is making that system stronger. Now, this is really important to understand. In 5,000 years of history, we've never had something like Bitcoin. We've never had something that was decentralized and secure. All currencies always got co-opted. Right. Gold, you would extract it from the ground. You would invade another country for their gold. It was an extractive-based economy, and then you would centralize that and reprice it. Yeah. Over and over and over again. And the centralization of gold made it an inferior store of value over the long term. Right. So it didn't work. It worked for a time, local maximums in different countries, but it always got co-opted. Yeah. So the first time in history we have something that, if it stays decentralized and secure, prices are not will, but are and will fall against it forever. Yeah. So my house, I say this all the time, but my house was $1.4 million 4 years ago. It's now $2.1 million. So in instead of saying dollars or Canadian dollars, say Canadian pieces of paper I measure my house in. Yeah. In Bitcoin, my house was 300 Bitcoin 4 years ago, and now it's 26 Bitcoin. Yeah. Right. So my house is falling in Bitcoin, even though it's going up relative to the piece of paper. Right. And so all prices are falling in Bitcoin, and they will forever. Energy prices are falling in Bitcoin. And so if you're measuring Bitcoin from a piece of paper and you think it's going up, that's the error code. Right. If you measure what currency should measure, prices of other things, you'll see it's operating perfectly in a free market, and all prices are falling against it and will forever.
So how do we get to that place, though, where people are thinking, because you're I think you're probably one of the only people that I know that thinks that way. There's a couple other Bitcoin maximalists who've been in this long enough that they think that way, rather than in dollars. They think in, well, it buys me more stuff than it did before. How do we get to a point where that is the fundamental understanding of Bitcoin for a vast majority of the holders?
One person at a time. What you're doing right now, talking to more people. So you could, so you don't have to believe what I just said. You can fact check it. Right. Right. you can fact check all prices relative to Bitcoin.
It's not a philosophy.
It's not a philosophy. It's not when does this happen, and it's happening right now. It's happening right now. And so if the government wants to print 10 trillion more pieces of paper, Bitcoin's immune from that.
Right.
All prices relative to Bitcoin are falling, not might be falling.
So the yeah, I mean, Bitcoin's immune to that. But what's interesting, it seems like when the government prints more of these pieces of paper, more people seem to buy Bitcoin, which instead of saying it makes the value in dollars go up, it does allow us to buy more stuff for less Bitcoin. Am I right?
Yeah. So now you're talking about the people that are the early, when you first understand Bitcoin, and I had to try to think about it in levels of understanding,
right?
Because it's such a, if in 5,000 years of human history, we haven't not seen something like it, then the two things arise out of that. Is this truly what I'm saying it is? And that produces you must attack it as hard as I'm defending it, right? For at first. And so because if humans have always seen this node to centralize and we've never been able to evade this in kind of our stronger selves, then what's to say Bitcoin won't be centralized? Right. You have to take that high bar on Bitcoin. But if you're now, so if you just saw the first bit, you would buy an ETF, and at first it's going up faster than your other investments. Then you start learning more about it. Yeah. And you go to level 2, you go to level 3, then you start to hold self-custody. Then you start to see how this is not just I'm getting rich in Canadian or US dollars in it. Mm-hmm. I'm a part of a node that's changing the fabric of the world we live in. Mm-hmm. That's bringing 8 billion people in service of 8 billion people. Yeah. That's where this goes, and it's entirely a different construct than an extractive economy we've always lived in. Right. But it takes time to go through that because you don't have the if you saw your brain, right? You don't have the mental lattice to hold on to this new thought because it's never existed before. Yeah. So it's really challenging for people to get that. And how do you get that? Trial and kind of error correction as you talk to more people, as you start to see this play out. And we're just really early in that cycle playing out.
You mentioned that we kind of live in this kind of consumeristic economy. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but there was last year my wife wanted to get a road bike. She wanted to get into road biking. So I had to sell some Bitcoin to buy the bike. And it took a lot for me to think about this because I'm like, well, if she's going to buy a $2,000 bike, that is probably a $4,000 bike in a couple of years and a $10,000 bike in a few more years. And so it made me think about, okay, well, how important is it for us to buy this bike that it's actually the opportunity cost on this is quite significant down the road. And I think what it does is it stops me from spending my money on things that aren't really important. Bitcoin causes me to be much more of a saver than I am a consumer. Is that a value proposition, or is that an important part of Bitcoin?
It is. I would say every one of those decisions in a free market, you're going to buy something when it's right for you, regardless of and if you know Bitcoin, then you'll probably save more and be more thoughtful. Right. But somebody else, when they decide they want something, they're going to want something. And that's why actually Bitcoin constantly distributes too, because of choices in the free market that you just made to buy a bike. Yeah. Because you wanted a bike now. Right. Right. Yeah. And you even though you know it's going to be worth more later on, or worth less in Bitcoin terms later on. Yes. You wanted a bike now. Yeah. So now let's use housing as an example because we just described how my house is actually going down in Bitcoin. Yeah. And in 4 years, my house will probably be worth 2 Bitcoin. Right. So, but what if I really want a house, right, for my family? Then I had a whole bunch of Bitcoin. then I would go buy a house, just like free actors do all the time in an economy. Now, a house today, it doesn't act like a house did 100 years ago. A house 100 years ago used to be utility value, and families used to raise their kids, and you had a community go to the house because it was a utility value. But when money is no longer a store of value, you can't store the money in the bank because it loses money. And the house, it creates a monetary premium that the only way you can protect your money from being stolen from you is put it in a house. Then businesses get involved in buying more houses. That now the house creates that monetary premium, and everybody feeds in to try to get more money, uses houses as a way to do so, which makes the problem worse and worse and worse. And then remember, the same thing that the government is creating by creating that monetary phenomenon, then they go and try to fix that by making the problem worse.
So do you think that the idea of investment real estate has had negative consequences in society?
Of course. So and just forget you yourself, because it'll take it's got too much kind of emotional tension, because no, I don't do that.
Right.
But what about Blackstone then?
Right.
Right. And massive PE funds.
Yeah.
That your money is in, because if your money isn't in them, you lose money faster in the bank.
Yeah. That
just aggregates and centralizes further, and then entire communities are PE-backed housing.
Yeah.
And nobody can live there anymore, or they turn into slums because of that. Of course, it looks like that. So a house is a utility. A house should be measured as its utility value for you. That it's created a monetary premium because it had to create a monetary premium against an inflationary system that requires your money lose value. People are just looking to where they can store their economic energy.
Yeah.
And a house became one of those places.
It's an interesting ideology, because it certainly is, I think, a left-wing thought that you shouldn't be making tons of money on your housing and charging high rents and things like that. Left-leaning ideologies would fight against investment real estate. But the reason that they do it is not because the same reason you're arguing, right?
This is why this is so complicated. This isn't a left or a right.
Right. Correct.
There is no other ism, communism, capitalism, Marxism, that in our previous way of looking at the world that was based on extraction, that meshes with what Bitcoin is. There isn't.
Right.
But everybody wants to attach their previous ideologue to Bitcoin to make them right in that previous ideologue. And so Bitcoin is so unique, so different, that it reconstructs the rules through the free market. So it is the most free market thing we've ever seen. All of these other isms, capitalism turns into crony capitalism, which turns into totalitarianism. Marxism turns into communism, which turns into totalitarianism. All of them are control structures.
Right.
And this is the first time we haven't had a control structure. It imposes the free market discipline on the world, and the byproduct of the free market. The free market is the only thing we've ever seen that allows us to trade with people we don't like, and benefit from it.
Right. Interesting. What do you think when Donald Trump announced that the American government under his administration would hold some Bitcoin on its balance sheet? And I heard a number of Bitcoiners that were kind of speaking out about that. One person that I heard this from, which I thought was interesting perspective, was he viewed that as quite a negative thing, because that would give the government a stronger footing because they'd be more financially responsible. And a lot of Bitcoiners want at least a minimal government or a destruction of the government at best. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. But again, these are, remember, this is going to be really chaotic on the way through.
Yeah.
because most people are still measuring Bitcoin from a US dollar system. So they will strengthen a US dollar system on top of Bitcoin, which then will, if that happened, if I could simply say this, if Bitcoin isn't used as a medium of exchange, it will fail as a store of value.
Okay, so and it's not really being used as a medium of exchange
It
today,
is all
right?
around the world.
Okay,
If you look,
but at a meaningful volume.
Meaningful. If you looked at Lightning transactions, meaningful. It's not used as a medium of exchange at a meaningful volume in places where you have less inflation.
Okay.
Or you have more where we are.
So the worst places in the world are using Bitcoin more.
And you're seeing Lightning adoption. Lightning adoption is moving faster than the internet grew.
Oh, interesting.
And as a medium of exchange. And Fedi and Fediment on top of Lightning, the protocol stack that is providing everything in this transition, Nostr, Fediment, Cashew, Lightning, Bitcoin on top of Bitcoin, is providing a parallel economy of trade that is unstoppable, that's growing at such outrageous rates, and most people are blind to the fact that it's even happening.
Right.
Because they don't even understand Bitcoin as a protocol first, or the thing that we were talking about is this is exploding.
Right.
And what would be natural, right? So in any monopoly, who goes first? The people closest to the monopoly, or the people most hurt by the monopoly?
What do you mean goes first?
Who is advantaged first by let's say a technology change, right? That do phone companies, or let's say landlines, right? Do they invent the cell phones?
I mean, I guess the people who are most disadvantaged by the monopoly benefit the most when it collapses.
Exactly. But they also, because the new innovation brings so much value to them, because they're so far away from the monopoly.
Yeah.
They're not in the telephone company. They're
Right.
not in the wire business. They're in a different business.
Yeah.
They go first.
Yeah.
And then that imposes that free market, because it's so powerful, grows and grows, and it grows extraordinarily fast to the point where the people in the monopoly get destroyed. You here in Vancouver, me here in Vancouver, anyone in the US, anyone in Europe and everything else are close to the money monopoly. In Africa, in South America, in El Salvador, in Argentina and Venezuela, no matter what their control system says, they're furthest away.
Mm-hmm.
And you should see this exploding. And why do you know? Because you can see the Lightning adoption.
Right.
You can see, and so I'm fascinated when people say it's not working, when it's growing faster than the internet.
Yeah, I guess that's the context in which we need to think about outside of who I am in my everyday life. Yeah. Even I don't know if this is factually true, but I've heard many times that Vancouver has the largest number of companies that accept Bitcoin in the world as a city. I'm not sure if that's true, but my wife last week was going to the tanning salon or getting her nails done, and they've got a Bitcoin sign in the window accepting Bitcoin, which is, these kind of movements are exciting.
Trudeau probably helped.
True. Okay, well, let's talk about politics. Okay, so Donald Trump's like a Bitcoiner now, and where does that? How does the politicalization of Bitcoin play?
So I don't think he's a Bitcoiner.
Okay.
I think he might be at step one, but he's how do I get more money in U.S. terms to get elected? And so he has an altcoin. He has a whole bunch of other stuff.
We've got NFTs now.
So he doesn't understand this at the level that he would need to. It's being used as a way to be able to attract this vote.
And is that a bad thing?
No, because it's inevitable anyways. If the number of Bitcoiners are growing all around the world, and slight changes and kind of passionate voters change elections, then every politician has to to advocate for large audiences growing.
Yeah.
It's how the world works. And so we're just really early in that cycle. In fact, I'd say RFK far more understands Bitcoin than Donald Trump, but it doesn't really matter. If you take a look at you 10 years ago, you 5 years ago, your understanding of Bitcoin has grown over time.
Yes.
Everyone's does.
Yeah.
And so now there's a lot of Bitcoiners that I would say understand it at such a deep philosophical level. And once they're there, they can't understand why everybody else doesn't get it.
Right.
When they themselves didn't understand it 5 years previously. So it's just so whether it's political, whether it's all of these different things, this is a natural course of people understanding something so novel that's never existed before.
Mm.
And then as they start to understand it, they start to spend more time in it.
Yeah.
And they start to, like we're doing at EcoDeath, move all my time to it so that we can expand the system, the parallel economy that we want to live in for our children.
Yeah. Do we see Bitcoin victories in Canada as well in the future?
Are you saying political?
Yeah, politically.
Yes. And yeah, so I was on the street the other day, and Pierre Poilievre yelled out my name and came up and chatted. So we have politicians that know kind of what this means now, and are advocating for freedom and moving against policies that are centralizing and controlling, and people are going to have a vote to what world should they live in, and they're going to see through the nonsense of the eventually of the system that's extracting value from them.
Yeah,
in names of helping them.
Right.
The name of helping them.
It's yet to happen to me where I've been walking down the street and the future prime minister of a country yells my name and comes to chat with me. I mean, that's a pretty exciting thing, to hear about. And do you see Western countries, or are there Western countries that are a leader in this space? Because we obviously have kind of, as you've said, the developing countries and countries who are struggling with incredible amounts of inflation that are moving towards Bitcoin. Do we see Western leaders in this way?
So in the U.S., the Constitution it's a piece of paper in the end that if it was allowed to keep going, because money is superordinate to laws, and the Constitution would get whittled down in favor of the centralization of money and who controls money. So if you control money and you control political or economic or who tells you the rules are, you get to decide it all. And so so if money is broken and it's superordinate to laws change in order to the people who have money, right? And it's always guised that we're doing it for your protection against those bad guys.
Right.
And everything in it makes that system stronger against you.
Right.
So if that's true, and by the way, you could take the counter argument to what I just said and say, where was money most broken? And do the laws protect the citizens? Right. So you know what I'm saying is true.
Yeah.
Now if that's true, then the Constitution is actually probably the best piece of paper, Magna Carta first, then the Constitution, that protected individual rights and freedoms of a free market. Because free markets are more productive, all people from all over the world moved to the U.S. from where they were captured and they couldn't have their voice to create a thriving society in the U.S. That was the dawn of the superpower of the U.S.
Right.
Which is now getting whittled away because of the destruction of the centralization of money and the manipulation of money. But because the Constitution is still, people will fight for it. There's different states that'll fight for it, and it's not kind of one nation. It's one nation of a bunch of states that all have rights under the Constitution. That you're seeing that free market and that force of the free market seems really chaotic because everyone has different ideas. But it also gives a way for Bitcoin to thrive, because there is no way that some states are going to turn off Bitcoin.
Right.
They're already protecting it with their constitutional rights to protect it. So I would say, so outside of what could happen here in Canada if Pierre gets elected, and how we could move to a more free market with abundance of natural resources and abundance of energy, which would be incredible for Canada to be a leader in that. You're seeing a lot of leadership out of the U.S. too.
Do you see us with, our energy power moving towards a place where maybe Bitcoin miners start operating in the country and we start moving, I guess, in reverse to what we've been doing in the last few years?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I mean. Because when you understand Bitcoin, I use this example a lot, so forgive the people who've already heard it. But imagine, Jared, you own a bakery. I come in at the end of the day and I say, I'm going to buy all your extra bread. I just want a discount. We make a deal to make a discount. The next day you produce 2 times as much bread. I come in the next day, I buy it all. Next day you produce 10 times as much. And you think, I hope he shows up.
Mm-hmm.
I show up, I buy it all. Next day you buy more ovens and more mixers and everything else. So you invest capital to be able to produce 1,000 times more bread.
Mm-hmm.
I show up, I buy it all. The next day you buy more machinery. So you're financing your operation of growth with a buyer of all the time, will always buy. And you create bread abundance, right? As much as you could ever eat, bread abundance, because you always have. Now insert Bitcoin mining and energy instead of bread and bakery, and you create energy abundance. Pierre knows this.
Right.
And so you're going to utilize assets in Canada and our abundant energy, and you're going to pay for them by having free markets to attract the capital and infrastructure to be able to exploit that natural abundant energy.
Do you have an idea of, is this hydro? Is this flaring? What type of energy do you see this being?
It will be everything.
Okay.
It literally, because Bitcoin doesn't care.
Right.
It cares about the cheapest energy. So it's a forcing function. Think about even BC where we are. To pay for the Site C dam, BC Hydro turned off all the secondary rivers, all the private enterprises that were distributing to the grid. Why? Because energy goes negative unless they do.
Okay.
And then you can't pay for the dam. But what if you had a buyer always?
Right.
You never have to turn that out. You build energy abundance by decentralizing your energy.
Right.
So it's so backwards right now, and why we have more and more scarce energy is because the policies are so backwards from the free market. They're centralizing, just like the policies are so backwards in all of our markets, that they're making the problem worse, and they're driving the division of society out of the manipulation of money. You could simply ask this: name the problem you have, and tell me how it is solved. Like the thing you care most about, whether it's people in Africa starving, whether it's war, whether it's climate change, whether it's anything, and tell me how that problem is solved by making more units of pieces of paper to price things higher.
Yeah.
And what you realize is the entire structure of the world right now on that manipulated money is making all of these problems worse. But most people are inside that system, thinking there's a solve from that system, from the very system that's actually extracting from them.
Can I throw some problems, some societal problems at you, and you tell me how Bitcoin solves the problem?
Yep.
Okay. So housing is so expensive here. It's unaffordable for any reasonable family to buy a house. How does Bitcoin solve that problem? Houses
in Bitcoin are falling to their utility value.
Okay. What about drugs? Everybody does drugs in this city.
So why do they do drugs? Right. So you're ripping apart the fabric of society, where people don't feel belonging anymore.
Yeah.
And the entire system is now, okay, those people matter more than you, right? And you don't matter. Now you're worried about your next job or your next everything else, and you can't keep up.
Yeah.
you turn to drugs or because you've lost your will because you don't know how to. So, I asked this question to one of the heads of Save the Children, and I because she couldn't understand Bitcoin, and I said, okay, great. I said, how long have you been at Save the Children? She said 10 years. I said, okay, what was your budget 10 years ago? 500 million a year. What's your budget now? 5 billion a year.
Okay.
10 times in 10 years. Budget has increased 10 times. So I said, is the problem you're solving better or worse? And she went on for like 10 minutes about how bad, the emotional baggage about how bad this was and how they couldn't keep up and how much more money they needed. I said, where do you get your money? The money is the problem. The money is coming from a whole bunch of people that are trying to get a tax incentive and feel good about giving it to somebody else to make somebody else feel good somewhere else. And very little of that money ever gets to the people.
Right.
It makes somebody feel good that it's not their fault.
Right.
And it hit her like a ton of bricks that she then became a Bitcoiner and now is seeing the world in a totally new light.
Right.
And when you're in some of these communities that are circular economies on Bitcoin and you see the abundance and you see the change in people's behavior and what the hope that they have for the future, you can't unsee that. Right. I've been to some of these villages in Africa where they make $1 a day that now they have electricity because of Bitcoin mining.
Right.
And you can see the hope and what they're creating in those communities, and those communities are connecting with other communities that are on Bitcoin and creating circular economies from there. You can't unsee that.
I went to grad school and my thesis was on, my thesis title was The Effects of Microfinance on Community-Based Tourism as a Method of Poverty Relief. And I was interested in this idea of like small loans to, women in villages to buy a goat, to milk a goat so that she could sell some. And I guess this was rooted in this idea, like there's got to be a better way to do things in the broken system. And now I look at it and I think, well, I mean, Bitcoin didn't exist at that time, but this seems to be a problem solver for a lot of these issues that we see in developing countries. Because you're right. I mean, so many of us give so much money to problems like this so that we feel good, but it doesn't seem like the problem is getting better.
So because of the system today is based on, remember, the free market is deflationary. Every year your life would get better.
Yeah.
Right. And even if you did nothing. So anything that stops that from the inflationary system is a control system that has to get worse because the money doesn't exist in terms of the debt is already insolvent.
Yeah.
Right. It's so, and the productivity rate, if you allowed the free market to work, the debt would all collapse tomorrow.
Right.
Right. So we tell ourselves a lie that it's not us, but we are the system.
Yeah.
We are inside the system, making the system stronger. And every action you take making the system stronger is taking more of your life energy.
Yeah.
And you're yelling at it, giving it more, right? And all of these problems are a symptom from this problem. But that's a big thing to, like, if you heard me the first time, right? That's a big thing to grok that you that you are a part of the world that you're creating.
Yeah.
And it's your intention and the things that you're creating. So you don't want to believe it. You want to believe there's an easy solve. Let's just give a donation where I get a tax receipt to somebody else that'll solve the problem.
Right. I hear a lot from my university students that Bitcoin is a Ponzi scheme or there's nothing backing Bitcoin. So why would it hold value? How do you argue against that?
So my view of Bitcoin, remember, depending on where you are in it, I think Bitcoin's like a prism, and it's a mirror reflection of your belief of Bitcoin first, and then you start to understand it at a deeper level. What I think it is, which is it's an open, decentralized, and secure protocol that's bounded by energy, creates more energy abundance by its very nature. The bread example. So as a protocol. We don't understand protocols very well. And protocols come in layers. And the first layer, to be able to be that protocol, it makes trade-offs. The trade-offs are it uses energy, right? Which is a good thing. More energy use, more abundance, right? So because of the free market, and the trade-off against decentralization means small blocks, or against centralization means small block sizes, and the way that it does this. Now that design space means Bitcoin on layer 1 can't scale.
Right.
Right. So if you just saw that design space, but you were measuring from a world where you thought climate change was really bad, and this is using energy, you would go, oh my God, it uses energy. That's a bad thing.
I mean, that certainly was a really common topic like 3 years ago.
Yeah.
But we don't hear it much now.
Yeah, because Bitcoin's obliterated those examples.
Right.
Because people are seeing what changed, how it brings abundance in energy, how it brings abundance, and it's examples everywhere. So you don't hear it anymore. We have to create some other noise against Bitcoin.
Yeah.
But as a protocol, and we don't understand protocols very well, and protocols come in layers, and what that means is you can't see what's possible on the new layer, on the next layer, until it's already there and you're using it.
Okay.
Okay. So what would that mean in Bitcoin terms against the existing fiat system, and Bitcoin terms in case of altcoins and everything else? What that would mean is people would understand, okay, I can hold Bitcoin and they would think it's going up in value against everything else when it's actually repricing things.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you want to print more pieces of paper against it, it doesn't care.
Right.
Right. So then that would create a whole bunch of Bitcoiners who were early in it,
Mm-hmm.
who would get rich in fiat terms.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And those people, and then it would create another demand and say, but Bitcoin can't scale to 8 billion people. So we need a different blockchain to be able to do that. And Bitcoin is open, so it's not private.
Mm-hmm.
So we need a different blockchain but all of those other use cases by very nature have to centralize.
Mm-hmm.
So they could never withstand the pressure of a state stopping them.
Right.
So because they have to centralize. And then all of a sudden Lightning Network gets discovered or invented, and there's a whole bunch of use cases and making trade-offs on the first layer, but now you have something that does scale.
Mm-hmm.
And it's scaling, and you have a payment mechanism that instead of paying Visa 2.5%, you can pay almost nothing.
Right.
And have peer-to-peer transactions around the world instantly. And it's all interoperable. So you have more and more people building onto that. And then you Fediment on top of that. And you have something that's completely private and secure chat, conversations, money, completely private. And these are all native on top of Bitcoin.
Right.
In layers on top of Bitcoin. You have Nostr,
Yes.
which is an identity protocol that is a communication protocol. These are all built-in layers, and they're all interoperable together. That is providing an entirely parallel economy that's immune from all the noise over here.
Right.
And it can't be stopped because of the way that it's architected. And every single thing that's built on top of it is utilizing the decentralized and secure nature of the first layer.
Yes.
Whereas all of these other blockchains become centralized or insecure.
Right. I mean, I did a podcast episode with Will from Damus.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's got to be one of the most intelligent people I've ever spoken to before.
He's awesome.
That guy is he is remarkable, and to find out that he lives here was exciting for me to sit down and talk with him and understanding, Nostr as a protocol and these layers on Bitcoin is so helpful to understand how we see additional use cases and layers built in. When you want to learn about stuff related to Bitcoin, what authors do you read, or who do you listen to on podcasts that you think, oh, there is these 5 people, they know what's going on?
There isn't that. There's lots of people. Preston, Lynn, Will.
So Preston Pish,
yeah.
Lynn Alden, Will Cassian,
Will Cassian, Miljan, and Thomas. I'm going to forget so many different names.
But it's helpful to hear some names for people to kind of go and listen to these things.
Pablo Fernandez, Gigi. I could go on. Alex Gladstein. There are so many different names. I hate that when people ask, because I'm going to forget. I'm not going to mention some that are so important.
Yes.
In this.
Yes.
the point of what I'm trying to get at is, I'm influenced by everybody, even some people that I don't completely disagree with.
Sure.
But I'm open to their ideas to see if it in pressure testing some of mine, that mine still have had relevance or mine change, need to understand that. And so because this is such a new space and it's being attacked and moving at such a crazy rate, there is no one person that could say this is what it looks like. There's people that on certain ideas, privacy, or certain have more knowledge, social graph, what does this look like? And there's kind of pockets of information that you'd say, okay, that person's track record of being right is better than all those other people.
Yeah.
Right. And so you'd take more weight of what they said, but there is no one person.
Yeah. What are you doing with Ego Death Capital these days?
So when I think about Bitcoin in the terms we're talking about, what it means is just holding Bitcoin. In the last 15 years, Bitcoin has an IRR, internal rate of return, of 45% per annum. It's not a straight line to get there, but the average is 45% per year, and I expect that over the next 15 years as it reprices the entire world in Bitcoin terms. My house doesn't have 45% per annum. My nothing that I can see has 45% per annum for any length of time at any time, but Bitcoin does, and it will. So that means the true rate of return of the free market is 45%.
Okay.
So to part with my Bitcoin, other than pay people in it because I use it all the time, to invest in something, I need to see a rate of return of over 45%.
Yeah.
And so why we created Ego Death Capital is because we're so early in this paradigm change that looks like the new internet, right? That, remember how many people really saw what the internet was going to do? Very few.
Yeah, not many.
Right? And which impacts every single business and every single one of us in the world, which brings 8 billion people in service of 8 billion people. What we looked at is, where could we invest in businesses that were creating the value on top of Bitcoin and denominating their balance sheet because they were profitable in Bitcoin terms in Bitcoin. So it would look like, where could we find that? And how, for an analogy, because this is such a new space, an analogy would be, you're in Venezuela in the year 1999, and you see Google, and it's a startup, and you can take your Venezuelan bolivar, and you can move it into Google and get tech company returns, growth returns, but measured in US dollars.
Right.
That's what's happening to Bitcoin, and that's what's happening to the companies on top that are denominating in Bitcoin. The growth rate is staggering, and why is the growth rate staggering? Because they're providing so much value to humans. Their growth rate is staggering. And as a result, they're acquiring more Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and they're growing at that rate. So and it was selfishly, I wanted to create Ego Death because I wanted to move my time into the system I wanted to see move. And I thought, the thing I'm really good at is helping entrepreneurs create their value. I've been an entrepreneur. I've made tons of mistakes, but I understand the process of where we're going.
Right. So
how could I use the thing I'm really good at to help entrepreneurs building this new world and move my time at the same time? And so it's been extraordinary. I cannot believe what I get to see, what I get to do, the people that I meet, the both capital entrepreneurs, what you see in this space as it's emerging, it's remarkable.
Do you see, or are there a couple companies that you can highlight that you have invested in with Ego Death that you see a really bright future for?
I mentioned one of them before, Fedi. would be one. I'd encourage people to check that out. You have on top of Bitcoin right now. It's built on to a Fediment protocol, but on eCash, Chamonix eCash, so completely privacy preserving, and money inside that doesn't even use Lightning inside the Federation. It's all eCash tokens that are that essentially free to be able to scale money and communications outside of. You see what happened with Telegram, right?
Yeah, that he got arrested.
You see what happens with. You're seeing what's happening with. Harris campaign wants to go after Elon Musk.
Yeah.
Every centralized program, every centralized communications platform is co-opted. Not it might be is.
Right.
So if you're spending time on there, all of your communications are too.
Right.
And so away from that dystopian world, you need something that's created that's completely different. So Fedi would be one that I'd be excited about. Breeze, another one, is probably the leader in self-custodial Lightning, and they built an API stack where essentially anybody can just use their technology to bring Lightning to anybody. So it's a protocol that you just turn it on and you have Lightning payments. So that's being built into a bunch of others. We're invested in Relay and a European exchange that's growing super fast, profitable.
Is this a centralized exchange?
It's an exchange where you can buy
and sell Bitcoin?
Buy and sell Bitcoin, but they've made it non-custodial or self-custodial.
Okay.
So it's all the on-ramps and anything that we would be investing in would kind of check the box of things that we see are required for the understanding and the ease of use of the world we see.
Right.
So
advancing
Bitcoin.
Yeah. I'd like to read a few quotes from Austrian economists and hear your thoughts on these ideas in relation to Bitcoin.
Yep.
And you don't have to speak long. Maybe you have a sentence to comment, or you're welcome to speak at more depth. So von Mises said, "Money is a social institution, not the product of a legislative act. Its acceptance is as a result of a slow organic process, not a sudden decree."
Yeah, totally agree. So I look at it as money as information. And so if you had, people don't want more money. They want what they think the money will buy them.
Absolutely.
Right. So if it's just information describing that process of what you really want, if you had misinformation in money, manipulation of money, then as a byproduct, you'd have to have misinformation in all of society.
Right.
Right. And so I find it interesting, kind of in that quote or what I just said, I find it interesting. People are confused about the misinformation while accepting the manipulation of money.
Right.
It's crazy.
No, that's an important parallel that certainly most people would never draw upon.
Yeah.
Hayek says, "I don't believe we shall ever have good money again before we take the thing out of the hands of the government. That is, we can't take it violently out of the hands of the government. All we can do is by some sly roundabout way introduce something that they can't stop."
This is Satoshi.
Like, do you think Satoshi read that and was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do that"? Because it couldn't be more Bitcoin.
It's not just Satoshi. So any innovation, if you look through the history of innovation, who is the person who invented computers? Who is the person that invented anything? And a lot of times you have that person, but before the person are all of the innovations that were required or things that kind of coalesced with a discovery of, I have it right. And then everybody thinks about the person.
Yeah.
If you look at the cryptography and all of the cyberpunks going back way before Adam Back and Hal Finney and all of the people and all the tries to create this out of that quote, probably.
Right.
Because, and all of those people were worried about the same thing.
Yeah.
They were worried about if cryptography is used against us to control us, we may never get out of this dystopian future.
Right.
It has to be used to free humans.
Yeah.
So, and every abundance creates a scarcity.
Yeah.
Right? So if or in every scarcity creates an abundance. So as scarcity as very few people knew what the cypherpunks were talking about. Right. I didn't at the time.
Yeah.
I now look back and I look at the long history of shots on nets by the free market to be able to do this. And then Satoshi utilizes a bunch of those things to create this. It looks like a one-person discovery.
Right.
It's not.
Sure.
Right. It's 20 years, it's 50 years, 100 years of of different things that led to that. And if Satoshi didn't find it, it wouldn't have been found by somebody else shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
And so when I celebrate that, I celebrate all of the people, all of the tries, all of the mistakes, all of the things that and then think about, because that's what the free market is.
Yeah.
It's all of those things, and it is today.
Yeah.
That's what and as one system gets worse, right? And hurts people more and more and more, and this other system's just open for you to just decide when you want to spend time in it.
Yeah.
Completely your choice.
Yeah.
That produces better results for you. You'll determine it how much time to.
Yeah. Okay. That's excellent. I love that. Let's do one more. Murray Rothbard says, it's not a crime to be ignorant of economics, but it is totally irresponsible to have a loud and visceral opinion on economic subjects while remaining in a state of ignorance.
Yeah, I love it. But so that is true. But it will also push more people away.
Okay.
Right. Because what they'll do is they'll use that to say, I'm smarter than you.
Right.
Which typically gets somebody to stay exactly where they are or fight you. And so when you just realize we were all ignorant on economics. In fact, how couldn't we be if the free market is deflationary and we've always lived in an inflationary world and economics is built on that understanding?
Yeah.
How couldn't we all be ignorant?
Well, it's very difficult to build an understanding because you live in a broken system. You go to school and maybe you study economics and you're studying it from the perspective of a broken system. You aren't certainly learning like these types of ideas. You're certainly not taught this in high school or elementary school. Maybe you're lucky enough to have parents who figured some things out, but it's not easy. The system is certainly not designed to bring up a generation of educated people in this area.
Galileo invents a telescope that can peer outside of the world that most people are measuring. Church and state tells you that the Earth moves around. The sun moves around the Earth.
Yes.
The Earth is at the center of the universe. Galileo looks out at his telescope and says that's patently false. He knows for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Because he looked outside the system everyone else was measuring from. But he looks like a crazy person.
Yeah.
Bitcoin allows you to have a telescope. You have a telescope. You're looking outside the system. And you're not crazy, and people aren't crazy. They know, and other people that are looking up at from within the system that think there's a solve from within the system are making their lives worse within that system.
Yeah. I mean, that is a great analogy. And I feel like that's a really appropriate place for us to wrap this up. Galileo's telescope is the lens in which we should be viewing the world we live in through the lens of Bitcoin today. I really appreciate you being with me here today, Jeff. Thanks so much.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks.